Hey friends, it's Cass with Garden House Treasures. Thanks so much for stopping in. Today I'm excited to share with you how I made these hanging planter earrings out of polymer clay. I'm really excited about this project, so let's go ahead and get started. So real quick guys, I am going to show you how to make one of the little pots out of clay, like freehand sculpting it, I guess you might say. But I do want you to know that I usually use a little mold to make my pots. I made this myself. I used one of these tiny little pots. Sorry, that's blurry. I used one of these, and then I used the Easy Mold silicone putty to make the mold. So if you make a couple and you think you're going to be making a lot of these guys, it's definitely a lot easier to make yourself a mold of the pot, and that way they're all the same size and you can just knock them out a lot faster. But for the sake of this video, I will show you how to just sculpt one. But I personally am going to be using the mold to make my pots for the finished products that you see in this video. So to make my pot, I'm going to be using Sculpey Primo in the color Terracotta, and I'm going to condition it really well, and then I'm going to go ahead and roll it into a ball. And you want to press your hands together firmly while you're rolling it to make sure you're not left with any lines or creases in your clay. Once you've rolled it into a ball, now we're going to go ahead and roll it into more of a log shape. And I'm going to put more pressure on one side of my log so that it gets kind of narrower on one side than it is on the other. And just roll it until you're happy with the thickness of it. Now I have it rolled out to the size that I want, so I'm just taking my straight blade and I'm cutting it down to the height that I want. So I'm just going to cut off both ends to make sure they're nice and flat. And then I'm going to go around and shape the bottom a little bit more so it's just a little bit narrower than the top. And then just pressing down to make sure it's nice and flat. So now I'm happy with how this looks, and you want to make two of the same size. And so we're going to go ahead and make a little rim for the top of our pot. So I actually finally got a clay machine or pasta machine, so I put it through that on I believe a 1 setting. So I rolled this out and I'm just going to cut a thin strip to go around the top of my pot with my straight blade. And I'm just going to wrap this around the top of the pot. Trying to line the top of my brim piece up with the top of my pot. And then once the end meets, we're just going to cut off the excess with the straight blade. And then we will bring this together and smooth it out with our fingers so that you hopefully cannot see this line very well and everything just looks kind of uniform. So here's our finished pot, and of course if you are making a set of earrings, go ahead and make 2 of these. I will also show you how I use my mold to make my pots. So starting off the same way, rolling it to get out any creases, and then I just roll it into a small log. And then I just push it into my mold, pushing it firmly down. And it's okay if there's some excess on the top there. I just want to make sure I get all the detail in here. And then I'm going to just take my straight blade and carefully slice the top off. Then we are going to pull it away from the edges and pop it right out. And then I kind of like to push it down onto my glass trivet just to make sure everything's nice and flat on both the top and the bottom. And I'm going to make 2 of these because I need them for a set of earrings. Now I just have Fimo in kind of a basic brown color. I conditioned my clay and then I'm going to roll out 2 balls. These can be a little bit smaller than the top of your pot because we are going to flatten these out. These are going to be the dirt for the top of our pot. So I've rolled out the 2 balls and then I'm just going to go ahead and set it down, and I'm going to flatten it with my palm. And then I'm going to use my fingers to kind of drag down the edges and make this into a nice circle shape. Then I'm going to bring it up with my straight blade and measure it to the size of my pot. And this is a bit small, but that's fine. We're just going to take our fingers and rotate the circle in our hands as we pinch the edges to stretch it out a little bit more. Measuring it again. And it looks like a good size now. So I'm going to score the bottom of my little dirt piece, and then we will also score the top of our pot to help make sure that clay is secured together really well. So I'm going to texture my dirt, and this isn't completely necessary, especially if most of your dirt is going to be covered, but just in case you can see some of it, I like to texture it. So I have the tiniest ball tool that I have on hand, and I'm just putting little indents in the top all over, and then I also take a toothbrush after that and I go around and use the toothbrush to add some texturing to my dirt. So there's my finished pot with the dirt, and we're going to of course do this to our other pot as well, so we have 2 for a set of earrings. I believe this is a Sculpey clay, but it was gifted to me, so I don't have the label, but it's just a dark green. It's definitely not Primo because it's pretty soft. I usually recommend Primo, but for these leaves it's not too bad to use a softer clay. So I just went ahead and put that through my pasta machine on a 1 setting and flattening that out. I'm going to go ahead and cut several circles of these 2 sizes, and we're going to use these to make our leaves. And you don't have to use the circle cutters, you don't have to use this method, you could just tear off several pieces of the same size or the 2 different sizes, but I just think this is so much easier and more efficient if you have the tools on hand. So we'll start shaping our leaves now. I'm taking one of my larger pieces and I rolled it into a ball, and now I'm just pinching one side to make a little teardrop shape and then flattening it, and just pinch it and flatten until you're happy with the shape. Then we're going to take our little needle tool, we're going to put a line right down the middle, and then 3 lines diagonally on each side going from that center line out to the edge. So then you have this pretty little textured finished leaf. And I'm going to make several of these larger leaves and a few of the smaller leaves. We're going to make them all exactly the same way, rolling them, pinching one side and flattening, and then putting our lines in, 1 down the middle and 3 diagonally up each side. So I have all my leaves finished, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my larger leaves, and I'm just going to go ahead and place these around the end of the pot in a circle with the wider ends touching each other in the center. And I do want a little bit of my leaf hanging off the edge of the pot. If that's not your preference, that's fine. This is your project. You can make it however you'd like. I like to have a little bit hanging off the end so that I can bend it down over. I like to make sort of a more droopy looking potted plant. So that's what we're going to do here, is just put them in the circle, arrange them until we're happy with them. And then I'm taking my ball tool and I'm just going to smush some of that clay down into the center to make sure it is nice and secured. And then I'm very, very gently taking my finger and folding those edges down over the edge of the pot, being careful not to smooth out the lines or details in my leaves. Now we're going to take that same size leaf and we're just going to place one in between each set of 2 leaves. And I'll go ahead and secure these right away because I know that that's the placement that I want. I like to overlap these because it gives it that nice full bushy kind of plant look, but you could do it however you like. But I like to make sure there is definitely one in between every 2 leaves. Just going around, placing them, and then securing them by smushing them down with the ball tool, and I'm folding these down just over the tops of that previous set of leaves. Now I'm going to go in with my smaller sized leaves, and I'm just going to place these around the center. I think I usually use about 4 for the first set, 4 or 5, however many you'd like. And just the same thing, just placing it, securing it down with the ball tool, and then draping it down over the set of leaves that is underneath. We'll go all the way around with this one. And then my last layer for the top here, I think I put 3 or 4 for this one. Same thing, placing them, securing them, and drooping them down. And then for the very last leaf you place, you don't want to press it in too hard with your ball tool because you don't want too bad of an indent in the middle. You just want it to look like the leaves are kind of meeting each other in the center there. So I'm happy with this, but I do like my leaves to drape down the sides quite a bit to look nice and bushy and full and droopy. So I'm actually taking these leaves that are just going over the edge a little bit. This is my second layer of leaves, and I'm just tipping them up a little bit, and I'm going to secure one leaf underneath each of these. So that's going to be in between every 2 leaves from our very first layer. So we're just going around, finding these in between leaves, pushing them up a little bit, and then taking, you can use either small or large leaves for this. I've used both and I found that I prefer the larger leaves for this part, but you can play around with the sizes and see what you like best. Just going around and securing one in each space. And really you can just keep adding leaves until you like how it looks. You don't have to do it exactly like this. Just do it to your preference. Once you're sure you are happy with how your pot looks, go ahead and take a small needle tool, or just a needle if that's what you have. And I'm going to use this to poke 3 holes towards the top of my pot here. And I want to go nice and deep, and put about halfway in or so. And we're making some holes for where we are going to place our eye pins. And I'm just trying to kind of evenly space them if I can. And it's okay if I go into, like, in between a couple leaves into the leaves, because it'll look more natural that way, like the chains are kind of coming out from underneath the leaves. And then you have your finished pot. Make sure you make 2 of these if you're making a set of earrings. So before we bake our clay, I'll show you how I made the second style. I made the pots out of granite in Sculpey Primo, and then made some dirt for the top the same exact way I did the first time. This is a color that I mixed it myself. I put it through my pasta machine on a 1, and I'm taking the same size of the larger leaf circle cutter, and we are just doing several circles. We're going to pick up one of our circles, we're going to roll it into a ball, and then we're going to roll one side of it to make sort of a teardrop or sort of cone-like shape. I'm sorry, my camera doesn't focus. But you want one side to be more narrow than the other. And then I'm going to take this little X-Acto knife and we're going to make a cross in the top. Do not cut down too deep, because you want a firm base still for the bottom of your flower. But you're going to make that cross, and then you're going to separate this 4 sections that you've made. Then I'm going to take a small ball tool, and I'm just going to start at the base of each section and roll up to make my flower petals. And I'm so sorry my camera wouldn't focus. I was having a hard time getting a good take of this. But here you have your finished flower, and I will try showing you again because I know it's blurry. So rolling it into a circle and then a teardrop shape. Making a cross, trying to keep our sections as equal and the same size as we can, not cutting down too deep, and then separating them out. Taking our ball tool, starting at the base and rolling up each section to flatten out our petals. And there's your little flower. So taking these flowers, we are going to put the open blooming part of the flower right at the edge of our pot. I kind of want it to meet up with the edge there. And I want to secure these down right away with my ball tool once I have them in place. Just going to smush down the center to make sure it sticks really well. Being very gentle with these. I'm going to go ahead and place them all the way around. I think I usually use about 7 of these, but it's going to depend on the size of your flower and how full you want it to look. So we're just going to place these around in the circle, securing them in the middle. I'm happy with how that looks, so I'm going to go ahead and start placing my center flowers. And I'm really just taking them and putting the more narrow end in the center and then just smushing and securing them in as best I can with a small ball tool, trying not to misshape any of my other flowers or deform anything. And I think I usually use 4 for the center. I really kind of smush them in there to make it have that nice full bushy potted flower plant look. So we're gonna just fit what we can. I just don't want any open spaces in the middle here. So just placing them in the middle and then using your ball tool to try to secure the base of your flower to the dirt in your pot. I'm happy with how that looks, so I'm just taking some plain white clay, and I think I did this on like a 1.2 or 1.3 setting. It was in between 1 and 2. And I'm taking a really tiny circle cutter for this and cutting out some itty bitty circles to put in the center of my pot. And some of them are going to stick to the trivet, but I'm going to have to pull a bunch of them out. Then taking our flower pot and one of our small ball tools, and I'm going to pick up these little pieces with my ball tool and then use the ball tool to place it in the center of each flower. And it just gives it a nice completed look. We're just going to go around, place these in the center of each one. You can use any color you want for the center of your flower. You can use a darker or lighter shade of the color of the flower. You can use white, you can use yellow, you can use whatever your heart's desire. Be creative. Here's our finished flower pot, and of course we're making 2 of these. And we're doing the exact same thing we did with our leafy pot and taking our needle tool to poke 3 holes towards the top of our pot where we can place our eye pins. And then we're going to bake these according to our clay instructions. I baked these for 30 minutes at 275 degrees. And once they're all baked, we will put on our eye pins and chains and all our findings. Here's our finished pieces after they have been baked. So I'm taking these thin little eye pins, and I'm going to need, of course, 3 for each pot, so 6 for each set of earrings. And I like to just take 3 at a time and even them out, and then I'm going to take a wire cutters and I'm going to cut these fairly short, but leaving a long enough stem to where I can secure them into my pots really well. Now I'm taking some E6000 glue and a small pliers, and I'm just gonna dip my eye pin into my glue, and then I'm going to push it into one of the holes to secure it. And I do prefer screw-in eye pins for most of my jewelry, but the ones that I had were just too bulky for this project. I think any kind of screw-in eye pin would be too bulky, so I decided to go ahead with these simple ones that can be glued in place to make sure I keep that nice dainty look for my earrings. Now we have our eye pins in place, so we'll go ahead and cut the chain that we need. So we're going to need 3 chains for each earring, which means 6 little chains for each set. And I have this real dainty chain, and I'm going to count out 16 chain links for each chain, holding it with my pliers to count it, and then we're just going to trim off our 16 links, which means I cut it at the 17th, so when I finish I have 16 whole chain links together, and I've got 6 of those for 2 sets of earrings. I only have 3 here, but you are going to want 4 small jump rings for each earring, so 8 for each set of earrings. And I have 2 small pair of pliers. I have a needle nose and a round nose. It doesn't matter what kind you have. And we're just going to pry open a jump ring. And I did not focus well on this part. I will warn you of that. The camera didn't focus. But basically we opened our jump ring. We took one of our small chains and placed it onto our open jump ring. And then we're taking that same jump ring and securing it to one of our eye pins in our earring and securing it shut. And we're going to do the same exact thing with all 3 of our eye pins. So we have a chain secured onto each eye pin. So now we need to get our earring findings, and I like these kinds, the small ones with just the little loop on the bottom. So I'm going to take my 4th jump ring, open it up, and we want to put all 3 chains on this jump ring, the opposite end from what's secured to our pot. We're going to loop all 3 of these onto our jump ring, and then we are going to loop this same jump ring onto our earring finding. Securing it shut and making sure there's no open gaps in our jump ring that our chains are going to slip out. And here we have a finished earring. And we're going to do the same thing with all of the pots that we've made. So here's our finished leafy pot and flower pots. I'm so excited about this project. These are perfect for spring and summer. I'm going to wear the pair I made for myself for Easter. Here's some other colors that I made. And here's what they look like on your ear. Not too flashy, but a little bit fun and kind of quirky. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to, please like and subscribe. God bless.